Hey there, friends. Welcome to Hawkeye Speaks. Tonight, I want to share an interesting idea with you that I had just kind of come up with today, having to do with evolution and ecology. So, I came up with this idea that we are born into two realities. One of them is biological, and one of them is the blueprint. Blueprint biology. And some of you may be familiar with this idea of the blueprint. Another way we could say it is our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, which is what our parents taught us and what culture teaches us, what we learn in school, what we learn through society, what is our acquired characteristics, that we pick up through life. And biology is the living world around us, of course. And the thing about biology is that it's incredibly complex. Of course, we are biology. We're life. We can study ourselves, the living organism, and the role that we play within ecosystems. We can study microorganisms, macroorganisms, the study of life. But we're using the word biology not just in the terms of study, but also to refer to life itself. Okay, so we're born into two different realities. One is our blueprint and one is our biology. And then that exists within another axis. Okay, and we're going to start off as a cross like this. Okay, blueprint, biology. And here on the bottom of the scale is a version of reality or a view of the world around us. It's another way to say it. It's very flat and static. That's at the bottom of the scale. And at the up top of the scale is a very complex and dynamic world, full of nuance, incredible complex, dynamic, interwoven complexity. Okay, so flat, static, super dynamic. So what happens is that biology is actually incredibly complex, as I was just saying, but our blueprint may not allow us to engage with that thinking or to see the world around us in that way. So we're born into two different realities. We're always tied to biology, but the less we kind of know about how it works, and the less we engage with nature, this is kind of a little bit of like the science behind connected with nature, the less we are involved with the living world around us, the less we are tied to a biological reality. And it is in these days of living indoors and living on computers and heading towards transhumanism, it is possible to live a reality that is actually not tied to biology, not tied to the biological reality of ecosystems. So biology, ecology, biophysics on a large scale. Biophysics would deal with the physics of organisms, but it's not just about the molecular scale, it's about the macro as well. How do organisms interact and benefit or detriment each other and the world, the ecosystem as a whole. So we're born into two different realities. We're born into our blueprint and our biology. And it's kind of, so I demonstrate that as a cross, and I would like to, I obviously don't have a graph here in front of me, but using graphs sometimes diminishes it to just this two-dimensional thing. And I want to think about a more complex moving system. But we could make it a graph, where we move up or along the scale, okay, and that at the bottom corner, imagine a square right here. At the bottom corner is someone or any organism, maybe it's not even a human, let's imagine a bacterium, that's just a complete obligate. It has no choice of what to do. In the case of a human, it has no free thinking because it has a completely closed mind and has been also not informed, educated as throughout childhood about how to effectively participate with the environment or what's really going on with the living world around us, and is also, very opinionated and indoctrinated, okay? So they have a very heavy blueprint. They're still alive, they're still biology, so we're existing on the scale here. Okay, but that's this bottom corner. And at the opposite top corner would be an organism, and I believe that this is only humans that have this ability to rise to the very highest potential of influencing the environment. I believe that we do influence environments very much. And we need to also be cognizant of how that works, how we as organisms influence environments, and how all organisms are, related to their environment and act as a benefit or detriment. In general, pretty much all higher organisms act as a benefit to environments if they're acting in a natural function. And then lower order organisms act as a benefit to the environment too, in general, but a lot of times they are mess cleaners out. They may show up, and we call that an infection sometimes when we see a proliferation of microorganisms. But the big gist of it is that all organisms benefit life and the environment so long as we are participating in life. Human beings, once again, do things that are rather incongruent with life, which is this thing about how part of the reason for the scale, let's take this into some higher thinking terms. I've been listening to all of these, not all of these, of course, there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of high-level intellectual thinkers out there. But I have been myself listening to more of these people's podcasts and reading more high-level literature, current stuff as well as past works. But one of the things I see within the intellectual community is a lack of awareness about ecology. And even you may have heard me speak about Nate Hagans in his podcast, The Great Simplification. And not to say that Nate Hagans is saying that he's a great intellectual. I'm thinking about other people in that realm. But anyway, within the whole group, Nate Hagans does say that he's an ecologist and has studied ecology. But the man actually does not speak about ecosystems, and he doesn't speak about energy within energy coming from the sun, energy managed within ecosystem management. He only refers to energy. He specifically equates energy with fossil fuel, with oil. And oil is something that we burn to get energy, but it's not a form of energy itself. And I get it that there's peak oil and the coming collapse of oil, and there's this type of thinking. I'm well aware of it. But to call yourself an ecologist and not mention what's going on with ecosystems. But anyway, to get back to what I was saying, I'm listening to some really wonderful high-level intellectuals, and unfortunately, I don't see people tying the thinking back into how to make change in the world around us, how to carry out effectual actions within ecosystems. All right, and that's why I was coming up with this idea this morning, and one of the things I was thinking about, and I'm sure you've heard this idea, and I was reading it in the book I'm reading this morning, about how enlightened states that we gain from taking drugs, psychedelics or otherwise, are kind of like cheating. We have to we gain a negative consequence that we have to pay the price for in a way, and it's hard to hold on to those enlightened states. You know what I mean? And in a way, I want to suggest to any intellectuals or any aspiring intellectuals, high-level thinkers, that if you don't bring your level of thinking, okay, because that's within kind of your blueprint. You're raising your blueprint up from being a dogmatic, limited thinking person. Because remember, we turn this into a box graph kind of a thing here, okay? And on this side of the scale is the blueprint, our standard operating procedures, our standard way of perceiving the world around us. And some of us are very open-minded, and some of us are very close-minded, but we all have a way that we've learned to view the world around us, okay? And we can learn more, and it can become more open-minded as we go up the scale, okay? And some of these very high-level intellectual thinkers, like I'm saying, they've moved way up the scale. But if they're not gaining the level of complexity within biology and ecosystems and related biology, the interrelation of organisms, Okay, so again, biology, ecology, perhaps I made up this other word a few months ago, biocology, or, also the talks of gestalt ecology, feminine ecology. I mean, different ways to think about the complexity of organisms and environments interacting together. Gaia theory, okay, to me, it's Gaia theory plus holistic management, plus regenerative agriculture, plus chemical mitigation and cleaning up the oceans. I mean, there's an element to that too, and reducing pollution. There's also, of course, an element to that, and absolutely sustainable forestry. I mean, it's a very multifaceted situation. Okay, which is, and another piece of this is that the intellectual, high-level intellectuals these days are getting tuned into and talking a lot about complexity thinking in different terms. And it used to be 10, 20 years ago. This is something to share. I think it's hilarious. And you don't see it as much anymore, thank goodness. But you still hear it. And it's actually how I got turned on to this guy, Sapolsky, who has been really popular lately, has a recent book out. And he was a Stanford professor for many years, I guess. And I listened to one of his lectures several years ago. It was about reductionism or chaos theory. And I'm listening to this lecture, and he goes through the reductionist principle, and then he goes into chaos theory. And there was a pause there where I was thinking to myself, well, the obvious opposite now is holism, is holistic thinking, is complexity thinking. And then he was like, and then we have chaos theory. And this was really popular, I think, from the 70s into the 80s or probably 70s into the early 2000s, that we did have a way to solve complexity, and it was through chaos theory. And I just think that's ridiculous. It's so funny. You don't need to call it chaos theory. That really endorses this reductionist thinking of order out of chaos, which when you look at order out of chaos as not so much a political thing, but as an evolutionary, a lot of people kind of have this view within their creation or evolution story, or order out of chaos. That's kind of a way of ruling out the intention of the organism, free will, the mind of God, however you like to think of these things, which also neo-Darwinism. That's what neo-Darwinism is ruling out, is the intention of the organism. Okay, so again, back to our scale here, as we move up this side, on the biology side, like I was saying, we go from a very simple understanding of the world around us. Like imagine 50, 70, 100 years ago, they didn't even understand really anything about the microbiome, soil microbes. I mean, a few people did get the picture, but in general, before the microscopes were being used, people just didn't understand that the whole living world is built out of bacteriums, and people are getting it now, that even smaller genetic material. Some people refer to them as viruses, or the microzema, protit, somatid, microspores. The entire world is made up of genetic material that doesn't have a mind of its own. It has a potentiality within itself. It's a record keeping. Okay, but anyway, it is a building block of life, but the smallest unit of life is the cell, okay? And from the cell, there's, like I say, at the bottom of the scale is a very, very simple understanding. And again, back, like I say, at the bottom of the scale is static and flat. And when I talk about desertification and what's going on in arid lands around the world, and even in other healthier, or not necessarily to say healthier, but more temperate, greener environments, people will have a tendency to view the world around them as static, as it just is the way that it is, when it never is that way. Of course, it's always fluctuating. It's always going one way or the other, towards healthier or depleting in health. And we play a huge role in that. We are a kingpin species, what's the word? It's keystone, sorry. Keystone, okay? So we have the two sides of the spectrum here. all right, where, again, on the bottom, a very flat, static world. And at the top, super dynamic. Okay, so I want to introduce one more concept before we wrap up this talk, which is perspectivalism. And if anyone who has studied, and I haven't, but anyone who has studied art history knows about this. And even kind of, if you just heard a little bit about this, like how great painters throughout history painted with different perspectives, you know, in the paintings. And the Chinese, or not just the Chinese, but the Orientals painted with these different, and again, I haven't studied art history, but I get the basic idea that, and this also can mark changes within society, you know, that when people started painting with these different perspectives, the greater culture at large was beginning to see the world differently. And there are kind of potentially levels to move up. I mentioned this book, that I'm reading a book, of course I'm always reading a book, but anyway, the book I'm reading today is called Force versus Power by David Hawkins. And just about halfway through, great book so far. But it's a little dated, but it's full of wonderful information, that's for sure. Glad to have picked it up. And the scale that it presents, and it's based on extensive kinesiology research. Kinesiology is the muscle testing, you know, where you probably have all heard of this, where you asked questions, or you can even hold an object up against you and then test your muscle resistance to that, and objects that are bad for you in either your health or your mental health or most spiritual, you will be weak to. Okay, that's called kinesiology, and he did all this, and he also talks about those who came before him, who did all this research, all right? Sorry, I forgot why I brought up the book. Okay, so I was introducing the third concept. I totally lost my train of thought, Doobie. That's probably a good time to wrap it up. Okay, well, let's review. The idea that we had today is that you're born into two realities. You're born into your blueprint and biology. Okay, there's also truth and reality. Yeah, I like to say, I came up with the saying a year ago. Truth and reality are two sides of the same coin, you know. And if your truth and reality happen to line up, that's really good. But sometimes they don't. And then you have to have other people explain it to you, you know. But here's the thing: your truth is not worth anything in society unless people agree to it. That's the way that truth works. That was another fundamental thing that I realized, is this idea of objective truth. It doesn't exist, and this is something too that these, again, high level thinkers come on. And this was mentioned in the book too. Oh, he was mentioned. That's why I was saying the levels. He did all based on all this kinesiology research, and he comes up with these numbers for the testing protocols. Okay, and it goes from 1 to 200, and then 200 to 1,000, and all of and this is again. So it's kind of a rating on the kinesiology, all right? And he's talking about how really bad emotions, what is the very worst one was apathy, not the very worst one. It was worse than fear and worse than grief. Was it apathy was the first one? Okay, but anyway, it goes up. It's like, then it gets to anger, it gets to these other, and then it gets to what does it get to at the 200 mark? Anyway, it goes up to 1,000. It's like the enlightened person, and it's kind of, we could put numbers on our box here. Let's get really linear with things here. Let's get really two-dimensional. All right, and we got 1 down here at this bottom corner and 1,000 up here at that corner, and we got to just get over a threshold. The EH/pH scale. You ever check that out? EH is redox chemistry. It's a measure of millivolt electricity within all life, and redox chemistry is very interesting. It totally ties in with this work of Michael Levin. Michael Levin is another one of these names that's thrown around. Everybody's tuning into the work of Michael Levin, and his work is really cool. Regenerative medicine, but also you got to go back and read Bob Becker's book, The Body Electric. Definitely read Eileen Mckusick's book, Electric Body, Electric Health. You know, there's cool homework to do before we get too intellectual. And then also, understanding biology. To me, the master biologist, Lynn Margulis, going back and discovering the lost chapter in the history of biology, the work of Antoine Béchamp, pleomorphism, the microzema, the protit, the somatid, the microspore, the basic building block of life. And it's awesome. Tune in yourself to these ideas of how neo-Darwinism was a poisonous idea, and that the music of life is not a new idea. Check out the work of Mei Wan Ho, of Dennis Noble, and I wish I knew more of the Russians and other characters from around the world that already talked about this stuff. But that's it. A few thoughts about the graph today. Okay, we're born into our dual reality, biology blueprint, and we want to. That's why, if we envision it more as like a living kind of cross, and then it's also a moving. There's energies moving. The masculine spinning off, and the feminine spinning in. Explosive and implosive energy, where the two meet, the point of love and creation. And it's within challenging the neo-Darwinian thought paradigm. To me, what is the anomaly point that creates innovation? It has to do with the needs of the environment, but not just stress in the environment. Again, that just portrays this order out of chaos. Okay, it has to do with the intention and free will of the organism, within conjunction of the needs of the environment, within the context of the ability that it has to develop because of the genetic material that's been stored and accumulated, the form. And that genetic material that's been stored and accumulated, it only stays making forms so long as the form exists. We don't really take raw genetic material and just make new life with it yet anyway, but so it is, the form is generally there to help the new form along, and again, it's our thoughts, actually. It's our thoughts and intentions, and this is as we move up the scale, up the trophic levels too, that's where the element of choice comes into play, and we have more and more free will, and we can utilize the role of intention to influence the trajectory of environments around us. Okay, so really, I'm just sharing this idea with you, and then also trying to encourage anyone and everyone to check out, like I say, because it's not just the complexity of organisms at this molecular level. I mean, you've got to tune in to holistic management. You've got to tune into sustainable forestry practices, and we have got to start planting trees and restoring soil health on the world. Because if we're not doing that in conjunction with developing our intellect and moving our blueprint up, we're on a sinking ship already. So that's what to tie it together. I mean, a lot of these high-level intellectuals are talking about complexity thinking. I started to say this, I guess, but if your complexity thinking in an intellectual realm isn't matched with the complexity within the environment, it's, like I say, it's a sinking ship, kind of. Let's move it up together. And that's also has to do with creating healthy community around us, which we want. That's what we want. I know that we all want it. We all want to be sharing food with each other, playing music with each other, seeing our kids play out in the street, having a good time, and seeing other cultures down the way doing their thing too. That's what it's all about, and creating more and more and more life. Health, 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 wealth, wealth, wealth. Let's do it. Love and prosperity. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe to the video if you liked it. Hope you're doing well. Say bye, Doobie.